Three-dimensional Spider-Man games began in 2000 with Spider-Man for the PlayStation 1, developed by Neversoft and published by Activision. One of the notes of this game is that it was narrated by Stan Lee, the creator of Spider-Man. You could definitely hear his love in him voicing his lines, which as a geek is just, wordgasm. Moving on, Spider-Man 2 Enter Electro came out the following year, continuing the same storyline. There was a third Spider-Man in this same storyline that I believe came out for the Game Boy Advance. I have no info on that other than that it exists. Moving on. In 2002, Sam Raimi was making his movie, and developer Treyarch and publisher Activision made a game in collaboration. Many movie tie-in video games happen, and that is that. It's just story, come and go. But a developer in the development team had a little idea of Spider-Man actually connecting his webs to the building. It went nowhere. The game needed a release schedule and all that. Nobody in the development team approved it or whatever. Or maybe he didn't tell anybody. I don't know the exact story on that part. So the game went out and published. Well, then he continued to toy with that fantasy, and he toyed with it for the next 2 years for the next year-ish. And then when they came with the news that they're making a Spider-Man 2 video game, he pitched his idea to the team, and it took off. Like, hey, what if we could make a real Spider-Man game where Spider-Man attaches his webs and swings with a pendulum-like mechanic? So this is where the beginning of the Spider-Man fantasy was truly fulfilled, with Spider-Man 2 came out in 2004 for the PlayStation 2, Xbox, and GameCube. Using this engine, the same team over at Treyarch would then adapt Ultimate Spider-Man into a video game. At that time, Spider-Man's comic books had all ended, or wait, I don't know if they ended, but they had also created the Ultimate line. And in Ultimate Spider-Man, returning artist Mark Bagley, who was the Amazing Spider-Man artist from, I want to say, the late 80s to the late 90s, so 10 years, he animated the Amazing Spider-Man. He is known for helping to create Carnage, one of my favorite Spider-Man villains. Anyway, so he was the artist of Ultimate Spider-Man, and so the 2005 video game takes all of his art and uses it, and it's in New York in Mark Bagley's art. I absolutely love it. It's spectacular. One of the cool notes is that you also get to play as Venom, and Venom does not move like Spider-Man. He does what is called vertical clinging and leaping. That is another mode of transportation used by primates in the jungle. So Spider-Man's mode of transportation is what is known as brachiation. That is where you swing from a vine to a vine. The sheer fact that he spits the webs out of his hands doesn't really matter in the realms of the technicality of the locomotion. So Spider-Man brachiates, and Venom vertically clings and leaps, which is what some primates do. It's really interesting. And exploring New York in those two modes is a blast. I absolutely loved it. Ultimate Spider-Man was amazing. No pun intended. Moving on, this is where we kind of ended with the glory days. Spider-Man 3. Sam Raimi directed Spider-Man 1, 2, and 3 and had an intricate love of the Spider-Man villains of old. He really didn't understand newer villains like Venom. The studio, however, they wanted more villains. They were like, Spider-Man 2 is awesome, and in Spider-Man 2 you had 2 villains, so in Spider-Man 3 you need to have 3 villains. Because obviously that's the logic that makes more sense in, good storytelling. So they shoved in Venom into a story that would have been a really cool Sandman origin story with Green Goblin's fall, like Harry Osborn is Green Goblin, with his fall being in the background. Instead, we got shoved in with the little Venom. And Sam Raimi admits that he doesn't understand newer age villains. He was a fan of Spider-Man back in the 60s and 70s. He ducked out, or rather grew up in the 80s or whatever, and didn't read any of those. So that's interesting how that movie had its reasons. Spider-Man 3, the video game, I don't know, maybe it was just that they didn't have any more ideas or anything, but It definitely did not have anything new to offer. Nothing. I mean, the random battles were the same. It was just on a new generation, and I played it and loved it for that fact of slinging webs in a PlayStation 3 New York. I think this was actually one of the first New Yorks that was finally getting to real size. Before, I believe in the 2004 Spider-Man, that was a quarter size representation of New York. So we were finally getting to real New York. Yay! And then the dark days are coming. In 2010, Beanox developed Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions. Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions follows four different Spider-Mans from four different dimensions, hence the title. So, in order to incorporate this story, they decided not to encumber themselves with doing Sandbox. Sandbox is a huge deal in the realms of like programming and stuff because they would have had to have done four cities and four different Spider-Man styles of web slinging. And it's like, wow, that's like twice as ambitious as the Ultimate Spider-Man with the whole Venom thing. So I can understand from a storyline point that you're like, okay, that's too much and too big, and we didn't want to do that. I just don't understand why yeah, they decided to abandon it. Anyway, so Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions does not feature the web swinging mechanic. That was where they lost me. I think I bought the game, I played a little bit of it, and I didn't like it, knowing that all of the inside levels were never going to then just suddenly whoosh into the open world. They were like, no, there is no open world. This is not that kind of game. I was like, all right, well. So then they followed it with 2011 Edge of Time. Again, didn't play this. I think it followed the same engine, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, maybe I'm a terrible gamer for not gaming these games, but hey, I don't care. I game the way I game and without regret. I'm just kidding. So then we get to Insomniac. My history with Insomniac begins with the PlayStation 3's launch. I'm well aware they did the Ratchet and Clank series, I just didn't play those. Mine begins with Resistance. When the PlayStation 3 launched, it launched with Resistance. An awesome first-person shooter, in my opinion. It had an amazing graphics. It had amazing, like, it was just silky smooth. Had an interesting idea that very few other first-person shooters have ever done. So you have your weapons and you have your playthrough of the game, and only upon replaying the game do you unlock a second wheel weapon. So like in total, you can have like 16 weapons, and on your second playthrough, getting the second wheel, you start getting the enemy weapons, and it's like incredible. Like, oh wow! And people who've played Ratchet and Clank are like, yeah, that sounds like the studio that made Ratchet and Clank. Like they really know diversity in weapons. Like, oh yeah, man, you can't just be going around shooting the machine gun all day long. Sometimes you want a shotgun, but then it's like you can't be shooting guns all the time. And like they had these aliens that were like little spiders, and they attacked you in groups. And I remember my first playthrough using traditional guns being very difficult. But then when you get this alien bubble gun, it just drops bubbles like proximity. So like the bubble would drop and that was it. Well, when the enemies come, you can like lay a line of bubbles, just go, and then those little spiders would just walk right into it and blow up, and it was awesome. And I was like, oh, that is the funnest way to deal with that. So Insomniac is definitely a studio I've been following. I think they bit off more than they could chew with Resistance 2, and I'll do more videos on the Resistance series. And Resistance 3, I thought was a nice, tight first-person shooter, but it kind of felt like it should have been like labeled Resistance Chronicles, a story within the Resistance world. I really wanted another Nathan Hale. I don't know why they killed him in the second one. Moving on. They then made a game called Sunset Overdrive exclusively for the Xbox One. I played it, loved it. It is a super colorful and vibrant game, taking place in like a zombie apocalypse that's very campy and yet self-aware. They make fun of themselves like a Deadpool level of absurdity. Like they know they're making fun of themselves. They know they're in an absurd story. It's self-aware of all of it. I really enjoyed it. I really loved it. But then came news that they were the ones developing Spider-Man, and everyone sat on collective pins and needles waiting for one morsel of news, and that morsel was, do my webs attach to buildings? And when they released their first round of footage and they were like, oh yeah, obviously, that's like step one in a Spider-Man fantasy. And like hearing the director talk of it like that way, be like, oh yeah, duh. Of course it does. Like it was like super obvious that's what, like, but whatever. I kept up with the photos just so I could, I love seeing graphics and photos as they're in development. There was this whole graphics controversy as to whether or not they looked like they did on E3. I don't really, I'm not going to analyze like that. I thought the game was gorgeous, played beautifully. Um, yeah, this is where I really do think Insomniac has stepped their game up to a whole new level with so they've always been known for great gameplay and great replayability. With Spider-Man, they stepped it up with storytelling, and that is where I would like to dive into the characters. Characters. The meat and potato of a good story. We begin here with Peter Parker, aka Spider-Man. He's played by Yuri Lowenthal, who first played Spider-Man in 2014, Spider-Man Unlimited for the PC. I myself was not aware of this until I researched for this review, so I have never seen nor played that game. Anyway, moving on. I thought he did an amazing performance. Absolutely spectacular. He recorded all of his dialogue twice. So once while standing still, like I am right now, and then the next on a treadmill. So he did it while he was like jogging or running. Like you can hear it so that like when you're web slinging, like he really has like this, I'm breathing and like I'm talking and I'm doing my thing. And it's like, that is amazing. So like you have to note it, like stop web slinging and just sit there during a phone call and be like, okay, that's cool. Then start web slinging and get a call and you'll hear it. Like he recorded all of his dialogue twice, every single line. Well, at least the open one. I'm not like he's saying the cutscene dialogue, but yeah, absolutely sensational. I can't say anything more. I could go on for a long time, but amazing. The actor did a great job. The digital avatars that they chose are not the actors. So all of them for this game are unique. And I thought the representation of Peter Parker was, well, quite awesome. I love it because with computers these days, they had Peter now, and like you could easily de-age him because they created him. And so when you see his geeky little young 7 or 8 year old picture with glasses, it was like, yeah, that really looks like it could be him. Um, yeah, enough said. Aunt May is the next character I'd like to talk about. So in her classic comic book portrayal, she is an old lady. She's frail. I would not use the word vibrant or strong to describe her classically. This Aunt May, I would use those words. She is definitely young, or not young, but she has energy and she is vibrant. She's running Feast. When Martin Lee starts talking about her, he's like, you inspire me with the way you do your thing. And it's like, so that's what I picture her, or that's how I see her in this game, which is interesting. It's not Marissa Tomei young. I think that was a little too young. But yeah, so that's her classic comic book. That's her portrayal at the beginning of the game. And then, of course, they do what took 400 issues of Amazing Spider-Man to do, which is the death of Aunt May. And I have to say, wow, Insomniac, writing-wise, you guys did amazing. It's a tragic story, obviously, so I can't be like, you killed her, that was awesome. No. Aunt May's death is tragedy. But the way they told the story, how it came down to a choice with Peter and Aunt May, and those words, you knew. We'll get to that. Moving on to MJ. Yeah, again, her classic comic book portrayal was, she's a model. Maybe a supermodel? I don't know, but she's a model. So she makes all her money on her looks and her being beautiful. So she goes to parties and she does stuff like, that's just the way they portrayed her in the comic. And that's really hard to write into good stories. Peter being a super geek and her being a model. With this, they shifted it a bunch. All right. So first off, Peter's older. So yeah, he makes all of his money while working with Otto, and that makes perfect sense. With his intelligence after college, he should be making money like through his how smart he is. And it would make sense that he was only a photographer to get through college. Like that was paying the bills. He was not a journalist, he was a photographer. So switching the story to do that Mary Jane modeling what? They never even talk about that she even had any aspirations or did a modeling shoot, nothing. This Mary Jane is a journalist. And I really enjoyed that how they portrayed her as a journalist. When she's in the Fisk holding, she asks interesting questions. Like she was definitely doing an investigation. An investigative journalist, I believe, is the term, and she definitely fit the bill. I liked her as it. I also liked her dialogue about just the other artifacts. Like that was so. At first, when you play as Mary Jane, I'm like, oh man, why am I not playing as Spider-Man in a Spider-Man game? I want my ticket back. No, but yeah, I'm just kidding. So I started playing it, and it's not that you win and it's completely a low beat. No, this is just, as all good stories, you have to have your ups and your downs. And in this down, it's not a true down like it's a downer. No, it's just down in that you're not Spider-Man, you're not webbing. Instead, you're here getting rich story told to you through like when she walks up to the sword and she's like, wow, I remember when Peter got sliced up with this. He came to my house. He was really hurt. I had to take him to the hospital. And it was like, whoa, that's a cool story. Like much of the story is given through stuff like that and through Peter's backpacks. And I really loved it, showing how old this world is. Like this truly is Spider-Man's like 8th year of being Spider-Man. This is not year 1 or 2. He's been doing this a long time. And Mary Jane has been there pretty much the whole time. All right. So I love their dialogue. I loved it. Loved her, everything. All right, moving on. Martin Lee, aka Mr. Negative. His first appearance was in May 2007. I actually wasn't reading comics by then, so I never read his story. So for me, this is his origin story. I really like the Osborn and Otto Octavius tie-in to they made him as a child. And when they made him, his first outburst with his negativity killed his parents. And he admits that he killed his parents, but he blames Osborn for giving him that power to do that. And well, I thought that was an awesome origin, like setting up that both Otto and Norman have done some shady things in the past. And it doesn't like the Otto we got to see at the beginning of the movie was not like that. We'll talk later about him. Overall, I love the actor who did Martin Lee, definitely pulled it off with those. Like when you're fighting Mr. Negative, you can feel the anger and like Norman Osborn has to pay. He is the enemy, and you feel it. You feel his hatred. And when he was Martin Lee, again, guy was amazing. So enough said. Moving on. Captain Yuri Watanabe, aka Wraith. I didn't actually know this until I started researching it. Alright, so Captain Watanabe's first appearance was in July 2009. Over the next 2 years, she would have a little minor story arc where she slowly becomes Wraith. Wraith is a vigilante. I don't know much about her, so she made her first appearance as Wraith in 2011. After having researched that, now I know where her storyline is going, and I'm like, oh, awesome! So, in the main campaign, her story arc is that she is more of like a Jim Gordon to Batman. Like, so she just is there, they talk, they do witty banter. I remember one time, like, Spidey calls her, and she's all, what? I'm busy getting yelled at. And, like, I like that kind of, like, the cop dialogue and stuff, and, like, it was all right. I mean, I was like, all right, she's an okay character, but in the realms of literature, she was a flat character. She just didn't have a story arc. She was there, boom, boom. Supporting characters sometimes don't need story arcs. That's how supporting characters work. So I just thought of her as a supporting character, and then we get to the DLC, the City That Never Sleeps, and you do get to see it begin in the first one. in the first DLC, you get to see that cop die, and you get to see her start to lose her edge. I mean, not her edge, but she starts to become more and more angry, and she starts to lose it. And really, you see it go down in the second DLC, Turf Wars, where, yeah, you see her right at the end, but just Hammerhead crossed the line, and she showed that she was willing to cross it right back. And it was like, wow, I did not see that originally coming. Like I said, in the main story, yeah, you get to see the darker side of Yuri Watanabe. And originally, I walked away from all this going, whoa, I wonder what's gonna happen. I want more. But in researching for this, I'm like, oh, cool. This was her origin story as well. All right, moving on. This is gonna be the Sinister Six. We start with Max Dillon, aka Electro. He made his first appearance in Amazing Spider-Man #9 in February 1964. I thought his performance was short but shocking. The actor gave really great anger and energy, and the graphics and his appearance, everything. Like, I loved it. Um, I don't know what to say other than, yeah, and the storyline, his want to be pure energy. I like that idea. I mean, if I had like electrical powers, and you're like, yeah, when I'm around electricity, I feel more powerful. You're like, yeah, I guess, you want to be more power, more power to you. Next up is Adrian Toomes, aka Vulture. His first appearance being in Amazing Spider-Man #2 in May 1963. So not only storyline wise, but literally, he is one of Spider-Man's oldest villains. Fighting Spider-Man since #2. I've always loved Vulture. In the 90s, the Vulture had this storyline where he stole Peter's youth, and he became young and Peter became old. And I really, that was a fun issue of Spider-Man. The cover art sometimes just tells the entire story, and the cover had him gripping Spider-Man, and he's looking young and looking up, and Peter is hanging with his mask off, but he's all old, hanging down. And I mean, the image sold it alone. You'd be like, oh, I know what happens in this issue. But it was really fun seeing Peter old going through New York, trying to, figure out how to get his youth back. Anyway, so in this storyline, his suit is killing him, and Dr. Octavius has offered to save him. So that's why he's doing what he's doing. I really enjoyed when he grabbed Spider-Man, and he's like, you gotta love working for a man like Otto. Has backup plans for backup plans. And it's like, yeah, if you were a criminal for years and years and years, failing would get old, and you'd be like, but I want to, obviously I'm a lifelong criminal. I'm not going to change my life. So in order to not get caught, I gotta have plans. And so I love that line. All right, moving on, we get to Alexei Setsevich, aka Rhino. He made his first appearance in Amazing Spider-Man 42 in October 1966. I really enjoyed his story here. He just wants to get rid of his suit. So during an experiment that they were trying to put the suit on him, but it accidentally fused permanently to him. And in doing so, it also gave him strength and, yeah, like borderline indestructibility. And it's really awesome. Like when that dialogue is going on, they'll be like, a government facility worked for months to try and take Rhino's suit off, and they failed. Doc did it in a week. Wow. So yeah, that's his whole thing, is he just wants to be out of his suit. Doc mentions a poetic heart, but I mean, at no point do you really hear that. Anyway, I really like the part 1 of the cat and mouse battle where you're Miles trying to avoid him, and then you are Spider-Man fighting him, and quickly fighting him and Scorpion. Anyway, moving on with Matt Gargan, aka Scorpion, or better known as Crazy McCrazy Pants. I love that line. All right, first appearance in Amazing Spider-Man 19 in December 1964. So they just went with the same origin story here, which I love, because you hear it in JJ's podcast where he's like, yeah, I made the Scorpion. Yeah, I did that. Did I know he was going to be a crazy lunatic? No. And so it's like he accepts all of it, but oh, JJ, classic. JJ. Anyway, so yeah, he's pretty simple. I love him. Crazy Pants McCrazy, or Crazy McCrazy Pants. That was the one. But so he just wants his criminal record expunged, so he can probably go out and do more crime. I doubt he would disappear. Um, yeah, I love his character. I thought I enjoy that. Joseph, aka Hammerhead. They've never really talked about anything else other than that. He's only really been a side villain, in my opinion, throughout all of the time, which is why he's only got a first name and no other history. Anyway, he made his first appearance in Amazing Spider-Man 113 in October 1972. He was only talked about in the first DLC, and then they like showed him in the last scenes of it. And then I think he had a few lines in the last scenes. And yeah, then the last two focus more on him. In the second, you see him, and then you see him in a somewhat of an exoskeleton suit. And then in the third DLC, yeah, you really get to fight him like in new robot form. They went really weird with that story, but he's not one of like those villains that you got a lot of like heart or love into. So if they butchered and mutilated him into a robot, you're like, okay, yeah. I mean, he's got the metal head. No skin off my back. We finally come to one of the ones I really enjoyed, which was Norman Osborn. In the future, aka Green Goblin. He made his first appearance in Amazing Spider-Man 14 in July 1964. So in this game, he is portrayed for 99% of the video game as a villain slash politician. Is there a difference? Who am I elbowing? Nobody's here. Anyway, so it's not until the last post-credit scene do you see that he is doing it all for his son Harry. And also a little teaser that could be the Venom suit or something. That's what I thought. I don't know. I watched that scene like 100 times. That little, it could be the Venom suit. It could be anything. I don't know. When you see that, then when you replay the game, those articles you're reading about, you suddenly get another insight into Norman where it was like, oh, whoa. Yeah, he was a brilliant mind and was on a great path, and he was a shark, definitely. But then his wife died. And you can see in the article that, like, so his wife died, and then you know in the background what happened, that he had already done experiments on like Martin Lee. He was already willing to do shady like experiments on stuff. So when it turns out that his son has the same thing that his wife died from, you know, he then in the background began to do everything that he could do, whether it was right, whether it was legal, didn't matter. That's Norman Osborn, and that is classic, like comic book Norman. It blew me away because you have to play the game twice to truly understand Norman. And to me, that's where they talk about sometimes your villains, at least your arch villains, are going to be just as or more complex than you. And sometimes that's why they're doing what they're doing, because they may actually have the better good, or somebody's like in this case, he's doing it all for his son Harry. And yeah, it's the power of his love for his son that's making him do all this. And it's like, wow, that's good storytelling and classic Norman Osborn. Also, I thought that was the exact portrayal of how his hair should be. It's done in the comic books, right? And I'd never thought how it should be done in real life, or in real time. And then when I saw his hair there, I was like, yes, yeah, okay, that's how. Because I was like, they draw it a certain way, and I'm always like, I don't know what that would look like in real life. But now I do. And I'm like, oh, okay, totes. So Jefferson Davis is an officer that you meet during that warehouse mission. He helps you out in the warehouse a little bit, gives you that electric doodad. Then later in the mission saves your life. Pretty awesome. And it's pretty cool hearing all that dialogue about like, oh, you a tech dude? Just like my son. Took apart his phone, or took apart the TV when he was 5. Now he's unlocking my phone. And like, that little stuff peppering in was like, oh, that's cool. That's cool. That's character development. Yeah, totes. And then he passes, and that sucks. And it instantly transitions into Miles, which was so you had played for Miles for like a little bit, or you had seen him in a scene after, and then you maybe like walked down a thing as him, and that was that. So now you play as him, and you discover his dad is dead, and it's like, wow, that is one of the most inevitable tragedies to be set upon any living human, which is the death of your parents. And you get to go through that with him, and that's definitely the lowest of low in anyone's life. And it transitions to a place where all Spider-Man stories end up, which is the grave, the graveyard. And wow, you can tell, like, he's really smart too, like how he just knows what everybody's trying to tell him and how it doesn't really matter because he's going through it and it's really difficult. So, but then you get to see how he, grows and changes, and it was like, wow, this is an amazing. This is not a comic like Into the Spider-Verse comic, is in comedic. No, this was definitely a good slow burn storytell for him, where you get to see him at his lowest. He grows, he changes, he's becoming better. He's trying to help others. He's just trying to be a good person, and then he gets bit, and that was the one of those moments that, like, to quote Yoda, brought warm feelings to my heart when he told Peter by jumping on the roof, and Peter just jumped up on the roof and was smiling. It was like, yeah, that's one of those father-son moments where son comes to father, Dad, I'm different. And Dad sits him down and goes, tell me about it. And then when he does, he goes, great. Guess what? I'm different too. And like, is like, I'm going to help you on this journey. And that's where you get to the DLC dialogue, which was hilarious. Like, oh, like, first off, I don't know, that sounds borderline impossible that Peter is doing all of the math of his leaping and jumping in his head as he's doing it. But I totally understand the idea of understanding the math behind what you do. Like, if you're going to be swinging through the city at velocities that could easily kill you with or without superpowers, you're going to smash onto a wall at 60 miles an hour, stopping onto concrete. Yeah, you're going to be, a bug on a windshield. You need to know that math. You need to know, like, I'm going too fast. I need to not hit that or that. Like, I get that. And also, it's a great thing to be like, look, you are going into something very dangerous. By doing the math behind it, you will understand all of the danger in what you're doing. And so I understood that as a great learning lesson. I don't think, uh, although he is a genius. So in the DLC, I really enjoyed Miles calling Peter to talk with him. At first, I was all going to be like, oh man, is this going to be him wanting to go out on missions every time? And no, it's like two calls that he's like, hey, can I go out? No, no, no. And then he has other stuff, like he tries out for basketball, and it's like, no dunking. Or like in football, no touchdowns. It's like, dude, you got superpowers. Don't. For me, I understand that be like, he's got to get out. He's got to do kid stuff. Peter was a nerd, so it was easier for him to not be in sports, where it was just like, yeah, I just never had to show off around the other guys. I just continue to not show off. I mean, I think he did do it a few times because that's just part of being a teenager. But, and then when he broke his toe jumping, and it was really funny, he's like, did you know they can't do anything to fix it? Yeah, they just send you on your way. Huh. It was like, yeah, when you break your toe or your finger, they don't actually like do anything. They like put you in a thing where you limit movement, and they're like, yeah, see you in 6 weeks. Good luck with that. Yeah, breaking something's always fun. Anyways, Dr. Otto Octavius, aka Dr. Octopus, made his first comic book appearance in Amazing Spider-Man number 3 in July 1963. So, first, I would like to just point out that okay, so as a comic book fan, I grew up reading it, and he was, of course, one of the founding members of the Sinister Six. he's always been one of Spider-Man's both longest running villains, but also one of his like deadliest of villains. And then Sam Raimi did Spider-Man 2, and I was absolutely like just I've used this term so many times in this review, blown away. I mean, I fell for Doc. Like when he lost his wife and then all he wanted to do was to finish his work. It was a tragedy. And and so that puts him as like one of my favorite villains in the realms of his story, and how Peter is with his story too. This game did a better version. This is one of my uh, examples that video games are more in line with a book in the realms of how much, because when you sit down for a movie, you have a 90-minute to like 2 hours that you're going to sit down and do whatever. But when you're reading a book, you know you're going to be there for maybe like 20 hours reading it. So you're going to break it up into days. You know that it's going to be a little bit of a mountain to climb. And the story is then going to be a lot bigger. With that, they were able to just tell so much more in this. Um, Yeah, in the Sam Raimi, you got 90 minutes to 2 hours. Okay, so his love. Okay, the inhibitor chip. Okay, he's evil. Got it. Here, it's like, no, he's got like 30, 40 years of history with him and Norman. I love that storytelling. Okay, I've been reading Spider-Man comic books since like the 90s. I had never heard that Oscorp was founded by Osborn and Octavius, and those were the O's. If that was new storytelling, like the whole Parker Pride thing, again, something I'd never heard before, that's really good storytelling. And that tells you, an author, a really good author with material is willing to write new stuff, but as well, like I pointed out in this, every single character in this game has come from comic books. But that doesn't mean that every single thing has to then come from comic books in the story. And that's one of the things I really enjoyed. Like, you got to see, in my opinion, the most fleshed out Doc aside from in the comic books. I mean, they've fleshed him out so much more in the comic books over the years. He's not just one of Spider-Man's longest running enemies. Like, he actually took over Spider-Man's body and he became like the perfect spider or something. I don't know. Anyway, so here we get to this version in the realms of, yeah, so he's trying to work and save people. And I'm pretty sure, especially on replay, he knew from the moment he saw Peter's outfit that Peter was Spider-Man. And this is where we get to the whole, you knew. Like, oh my, like 2 words. This game took 2 words and gave them utterly new meaning. You knew. When Octavius says it to you, he unleashes Super Saiyan Spider-Man. And like that was what was really cool. Like, you only get to see that for the smallest amount of times in Spider-Man's career when he just unleashes. And then moments later, Aunt May utters it, and it's just that's good storytelling, man. Silver Sable, aka Silver Sablanova. Her first appearance was in Amazing Spider-Man 265 in June 1985. In the story, I thought she was, in the main campaign, I thought she was very cool. Loved her first appearance. Spidey's like, yeah, as the realms of this it goes, it was 8 out of 10. And then she hits something and boom, nails him and gets all incapacitated. And he's like, okay, 9 out of 10, 9 out of 10. Hilarious. She was very I liked her character, but then the DLC came around and that was where it was like, oh, you got to see another side of her, which I totally loved. Loved how she helped with the final battle with Hammerhead. Yeah, all right. All right, summing it up. So, the gameplay, absolutely loved. It is easily the ultimate Spider-Man game. It is the best Spider-Man game so far, pending that Miles Morales will come out soon. But this is in the same vein, made by the same company, so I would just consider it to be more of the same. if it continues to be so good. So this is the ultimate Spider-Man universe slash everything. Loved the controls, loved how he handled. There were several game changers, I got to admit. First off, in the realms of the suit abilities, I never found that any of the suits unlocked any great suit thing that blew my mind. That first one that gave you the ability to unlock your focus bar faster, I found to be the most useful, especially after this second game changer. The second game changer for me then, or I mean, yeah, the first game changer for me will be the fighting focus special thing where you unlock that you can do two in one bar. That definitely was a game changer and something to look forward to unlock. The next game changer would have been the after a perfect dodge, time slows down. That is an absolute game changer in the harder difficulties. If you get a perfect time slowdown, like you could get just a half a second to reanalyze everything, and you're moving at normal speed, and everybody else is slowed down. It is definitely a game changing mechanic in combat. For web slinging, I definitely did find that double sling to be, or I mean the double web zip to be part of the game-changing mechanics in the regards of web slinging. The other was the one to jump after. So if you're going a certain velocity and you land, it unlocks the ability to then immediately just spring up and jump. You just press jump at the right time. And you can continuously do that. I did that entirely through Central Park. Got through the entire Central Park just by leaping. It was hilarious. It's awesome. So that would be a game changer for web slinging. And yeah, other than that, in the realms of suits, yeah, I don't think there was any game changers. The one at the end that you unlock with the Doc Ock suit, I thought it's fun if you stay up on your weapons, like you activate it and like it fills like all your impact webbing, and then you quickly switch and change to like your tripwire if they were all empty. But then again, you got to be like paying attention to like, did I empty them all? I prefer to just go through, use them all, go to another one, use them all, go to another one, use them all. And in between all of that, I'm using my special abilities, which is recharging the gadgets. So yeah, I didn't really find any of the suit abilities per se, but the mods definitely. The slowdown after a perfect dodge is definitely one. All right, moving on. The story, again, that's why I hit all the characters so much, is that this story is amazing. They they told possibly what is now, in my opinion, the best Spider-Man story told outside of comics. So all the movies, unfortunately, we've got like a myriad where you're like, my personal favorite, Spider-Man 2, directed by Sam Raimi. I think that's a perfect portrayal of Peter. Like most of that movie shows Peter just losing everywhere in his personal life, but yes, he's Spider-Man. And it's like, that is the trial of being Spider-Man and being Peter Parker, and I thought it nailed it perfectly. Um, I think this is the perfect story for Peter. It shows an older one. We've all seen the origin. So this is a grizzled Spider-Man. He doesn't question being Spider-Man. No, like Mary Jane doesn't question him being Spider-Man. Oh, there's also no secret reveal in the realms of her and him. That's played out in cliche. However, now I do got to talk about those two words. So those two words, before I even beat around the bush, they're you knew. And Peter first utters them when he's fighting Doc Ock. And this is part of what helps you then play the game again and see it in a completely different, be like, oh man, I personally think Doc knew the first time he saw the suit. And he played coy. That's my own personal thing. And like, yeah, you could believe that. Now he did believe. But anyway, be whatever you believe, be that as it may. So they say that during the fight, and that, of course, unleashes Super Saiyan Spider-Man. So if you read the comic books, you'll know that Spider-Man, like 95% of the time, is not fighting with all his power. He's holding back. Because if he were to like punch some dude with all of his power, he would like shatter their face and kill them. So he's holding back in regards to like safety. So with that 5% of the time I'm now talking about, that 5% is when he is fighting a boss or someone else, like Mary Jane or Aunt May, is in peril or is being like, they're in the mix in the sense that if he does not fight for them right here and now, they may die. In which case you see Peter, Super Saiyan. And that was what Doc Ock unleashed when he told him, when he was just like, Parker, you should have, like that really does make you go back to that first time when he grabbed Spider-Man and he looked him in the face and he goes, first and final warning. It was like, yeah, he was actually talking to Peter right there. So I believe from the moment he saw the suit, he knew. But then moments later, after you finish that battle, you are seeing Aunt May die. And Peter is standing there with the choice. He could cure her. Everyone else will die, but he could cure her. And she says those words again. Or I mean, he says those words again when she says, can I see my nephew? And oh man, in the realms of storytelling, they nailed it perfect. In one video game, they told a story that took 400 comic books. It took place on Amazing Spider-Man 400, by the way, the death of Aunt May. So it took 400 issues to get to that, and they did it in one storyline, and they did it so perfectly that she had lessons to teach Peter, just like Uncle Ben had to teach him. And wow, that was just, I wasn't expecting that. Everything about the storyline just was amazing, spectacular, ultimate. All of the adjectives that describe Spider-Man deserve to describe this game. Also, I think it totally could have been called Spider-Man and the Sinister Six, but then we would have known that that's what happens, and that's part of how they are just, again, nailing the story. We didn't know it was a Sinister Six. They just lined them up. And then suddenly it's like, oh, it's the Sinister Six, but also that's not this story. This story is about Doc Ock. And again, I give it an A plus in the realms of story. Sound. What I loved was, again, how Yuri, the actor, read both of his lines. Beyond that, every other actor absolutely nailed their role. They were all amazing and spectacular. And like I said, in the realms of replayability, you are totally filled with so many either just Easter eggs in the realms of this is the Marvel universe, like go and stand on Avengers Tower and take a picture, and like the little banter, like at one point Peter's like fighting dudes with shields and he's like, I know a dude who has a way better shield than you. And it's like all of it, there's so many Easter eggs for the inner story, also for the Marvel universe at large. And yeah, even if you weren't a Marvel fan or a comic book fan and you just followed the storyline on the first playthrough, on the second playthrough, you'll see so many more elements of like, oh, this happened or this character will be like, so yes, it definitely has replayability. In the end, too, it has New Game Plus, which makes the game a lot harder, and Ultimate Difficulty. Ultimate Difficulty definitely is the way to go in the end, like it states, Ultimate being the penultimate. So with that in mind, I would suggest, I am a 31-year veteran of video games. I enjoyed playing through Spectacular on my first playthrough. I tried playing through Ultimate on my first playthrough, meaning you don't have any of your items. And it is incredibly difficult to get through like the first third of the game. Once you start unlocking certain game changers, like I mentioned earlier, then it becomes easier. However, play through the game on Spectacular, unlock New Game Plus, then play New Game Plus on Ultimate, and that is a fun ride. Definitely worth it. On Spectacular, when you uppercut and then you your enemies and slam them back down, it takes 3 web shots to do that on Spectacular. On Ultimate, I could not tell whether it was 6 or 7, but I'm pretty dang sure it is 7. So it took my entire web cartridge that was fully upgraded to get a guy and slam him into the ground, and that's just one dude. And so Ultimate definitely ups the ante. But if you come in with all the gadgets and all your moves and abilities, again, like I say, that is the ultimate way to play this game, and you would have the most fun. I definitely recommend it. I gave it my own seal. It is gourmazing. So, gamers of the world, game on and game well.